The wind swept across the wide plains of the Arizona Territory, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and mesquite. The sun hung low, a burning coin in the fading sky, painting the land in gold and crimson. A lone figure guided his horse along the narrow path that led toward the small farmhouse, nestled near the base of the rocky ridge. He rode with the stillness of a man who carried both pride and burden. The man was Apache, tall and strong, his long dark hair bound with leather, his chest bare beneath a worn hide vest. His name was known only in whispers among settlers who feared him yet respected his silence. That evening, he rode not for battle, not for revenge, but for something deeper, something no one could have imagined. The farmhouse stood quiet, surrounded by fields that had once been green, but now lay pale under the late summer heat. A soft light flickered through the small window, where a young farmer worked alone, stacking dried corn husks into a basket. He was not like most men of the territory. His ways were quiet, his strength hidden behind gentle hands that built and repaired more than they destroyed. He had lived in solitude since the day his father died, leaving him the worn patch of land and an old plow that creaked with every turn. Though his face was calm, his heart carried the weight of too many lonely years and the silent ache of wanting something more than work and silence. When the sound of hoofbeats reached his ears, he straightened, gripping the old rifle that leaned near the door. Strangers rarely came this far, and when they did, it was seldom with good intentions. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped, and then a shadow crossed the porch. The door creaked open before he could speak, and there stood the Apache warrior, his eyes dark and sharp like flint, his expression unreadable. The farmer froze, the rifle still in his hand but his heart thudding in confusion. The warrior said nothing at first. He looked around the small cabin, the firelight flickering across the wooden floor, the tools on the table, the scent of tobacco and earth lingering in the air. "I came for something," the warrior said finally, his deep voice steady but filled with something that didn't sound like threat. The farmer's fingers tightened around the gun, uncertain whether to raise it or not. The Apache stepped closer, his presence filling the small room. "You have nothing I can steal," the farmer said quietly. "Then what do you want from me?" For a long moment, the warrior studied him, his gaze slow and searching, as though looking for something buried deep. Then he spoke words the farmer never expected to hear. "I want a child from you," he said. The air between them turned heavy. The farmer blinked, unsure if he'd heard right. The warrior's tone carried no mockery, no malice, only quiet certainty, as if the words themselves were part of some unspoken destiny. "A child?" the farmer repeated, his voice trembling with disbelief. The Apache nodded. "Not for me alone. For the blood of two worlds. For the life that will live where hate dies." The farmer lowered the rifle slowly, his breath uneven. He had heard stories of Apache raids, of stolen horses and burned wagons, but never of a warrior coming to a man's door with such a request. "You must be mistaken," he murmured, though his curiosity was stronger than his fear. "Why me?" The warrior's eyes softened for the first time. "Because you understand what the land asks from a man. You do not take more than it gives." He paused, looking toward the window where the dusk settled over the fields. "I have lost too much. My people are dying. Our blood is fading into the dust. I need someone who remembers kindness." His voice lowered, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "A child born of peace might carry what we've lost." The farmer's heart beat faster. He saw the honesty in the man's eyes, the sorrow of someone who had watched too many fires burn and too many graves fill. Yet the request was beyond anything he could comprehend. "You talk like this land still has peace left in it," the farmer said, his tone quiet but firm. "All I've seen is hunger and fighting. You think a child will change that?" The warrior took a slow breath. "A child changes everything," he replied. His words hung in the air, steady as the heartbeat of the earth. The farmer turned away, running a hand through his hair, unsure whether to laugh, argue, or pray. "And what makes you think I can give you that?" he asked, almost in frustration. The warrior's eyes met his again, unwavering. "Because you are not afraid of silence," he said. "And only silence can hear what the land wants." Outside, thunder murmured far off in the distance, rolling over the ridges like an ancient warning. The night grew darker, the air thicker. The Apache took a slow step toward the door but didn't leave. "I will come again when the moon is new," he said. "Think on my words." Then, with the same quiet dignity with which he had arrived, he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The farmer stood alone in the dim light, his thoughts racing. The flames in the hearth crackled softly, throwing long, uneven shadows across the floorboards. His pulse hadn't yet slowed. It was madness, he thought, pure madness. And yet something in the man's voice had struck a part of him that had long been asleep. He looked toward the horizon where the Apache had vanished, the night swallowing his silhouette like a secret. Over the following days, the farmer couldn't shake the memory of that strange meeting. Every sound outside his window, every hoofbeat in the distance, made him wonder if the warrior had returned. But it wasn't just fear that filled his chest. It was something else, a curiosity that burned quiet and steady. He found himself thinking about the man's words, the idea of a child born of peace, of blood from two worlds. He had no family left, no wife, no brother, no kin to carry his name or his work. The thought of legacy had always seemed like a distant dream, something only those with fortune and luck could afford. But now, the idea stirred in him like a seed pushing through hard soil. On the fifth night, when the wind howled and the lanterns flickered, he saw movement near the barn. He stepped outside, rifle in hand, his boots crunching against the dirt. The clouds had hidden the moon, and only the faint glow from the cabin window lit the yard. Then a familiar shape emerged from the dark, the same warrior, standing beside his horse, his face calm beneath the shifting light. "You came back," the farmer said quietly. The warrior nodded once. "You didn't send me away," he replied. "So I came." For a long moment neither spoke. The night seemed to listen with them, the silence filled with the weight of things neither man understood. "I still don't know what you want from me," the farmer said finally. "You said you want a child, but you speak like it's more than that." The Apache stepped closer, his expression solemn. "It is more," he said. "It is the beginning of something that must live beyond both our worlds." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain, and the farmer looked into his eyes. What he saw there was not madness, but conviction, the kind that could make a man cross every border, every fear. He lowered his rifle and took a step back, letting the door swing open behind him. "Come inside," he said softly. The warrior hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the warm glow of the cabin once more. The fire burned low, shadows moving along the walls as the storm gathered outside. Neither man spoke as the thunder rolled and lightning flashed beyond the window. It was as though the world itself had paused to listen to what would be said next. The warrior's gaze stayed steady, his hands resting calmly at his sides. Then as the firelight flickered across his face, he said quietly, "When dawn comes, you will understand why I chose you." The farmer looked at him, confusion and unease twisting in his chest. "And if I refuse?" he asked. The warrior's eyes didn't waver. "Then the land will choose for you." The rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, tapping against the wooden roof like restless fingers. The farmer stared at the man standing before him, torn between reason and something older, something that whispered from the roots of the earth itself. Somewhere outside, a wolf howled, its cry carried through the storm, and the farmer felt that nothing in his quiet world would ever be the same again. The rain poured through the night, steady and cold, washing the dust off the roof and soaking the earth outside the farmhouse. Inside, the two men sat across from each other in uneasy silence. The fire hissed softly, the smell of wet wood filling the room. The farmer tried to read the expression of the Apache warrior, but his face revealed nothing. He sat still, his dark eyes watching the flames as if reading something in them. The farmer felt his throat tighten. This was no ordinary man, no wanderer or raider. There was purpose behind his words, though what that purpose truly meant still troubled his mind. The storm outside grew louder, shaking the shutters. The farmer finally broke the silence. "You said the land will choose for me. What did you mean?" he asked quietly. The warrior lifted his gaze from the fire. "This land remembers everything," he said. "It remembers kindness and cruelty. It remembers who took and who gave. The blood of both our people has fallen on this ground. It cannot forget. It asks for balance." The farmer frowned, not sure he understood. "Balance?" The Apache nodded slowly. "Your people broke the earth to plant fields. My people spoke to the earth before touching it. Both are wrong without the other. That is why something new must be born." The farmer stared into the flames, uneasy with the thought. He had grown up hearing stories of the Apache raids, the burned wagons, the ambushes, the scalped traders. And yet sitting in front of this man, he saw none of the hatred his father used to talk about. Instead, there was quiet strength, sorrow, and a strange kind of peace. Still, he could not trust easily. "And what makes you think a child can fix that?" he asked, trying to sound firm though his voice wavered. The warrior looked at him long before answering. Because the land listens to children. It forgives through them. The farmer had no reply. He poured a little coffee into a tin cup, his hands trembling slightly. The warrior took it without a word. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the storm and the crackling of the fire. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken things, fear, hope, and something that neither man yet understood. When dawn came, the rain stopped, leaving a clean scent over the plains. The farmer stepped outside, his boots sinking in the wet earth. Mist hung low across the fields. He felt the cold air sting his face as he watched the light creep over the distant ridge. The Apache stood a few steps away, facing the sunrise, his posture straight and solemn. "You came from far?" the farmer asked. The warrior nodded. "From the south, beyond the river. What was once our home." His eyes stayed on the horizon. "Soldiers came. They burned our camp. My people scattered. The few who survived live hidden now, among the rocks. My brother died trying to save the children. I swore I would not let our blood vanish like smoke." The farmer lowered his eyes. He had lost two in different ways. His father had died from fever after the winter drought. His mother had followed soon after, broken by grief. He had buried them both near the oak at the end of the field. Since then, he had lived quietly, tending his crops, trading grain for tools and salt, speaking to no one. The loneliness had grown like a shadow over the years, something he no longer even noticed until now. "I'm sorry," he said softly. The Apache turned toward him, his expression unreadable. "No man needs to be sorry for another's loss," he said. "But every man must answer what he does with it." Those words lingered. The farmer watched as the warrior saddled his horse, tightening the reins. "Will you come again?" he asked before realizing how strange it sounded. The Apache paused and looked at him with quiet certainty. "When the moon turns dark again," he said. Then he rode off into the mist, leaving the farmer standing alone in the pale light of morning, unsure if what had happened was real or part of some strange dream. The days passed slowly after that. The farmer returned to his chores, mending fences, fixing the barn roof, tending to the soil that had grown hard after the storm. But the silence felt different now. Every sound of the wind or rustle in the grass made him look up, expecting to see the warrior's shadow near the ridge. He told himself it was foolish, yet his thoughts returned to those words. The land remembers. He began noticing small things he had never cared for before. The tracks of deer near the stream, the way the wind shifted before rain, the soft hum of insects that rose at dusk. It was as if the land had come alive again, whispering in ways he had forgotten to listen for. One evening, a rider came from the nearby town, bringing supplies and news. The man was a trader, broad-shouldered and talkative. Over supper, he spoke of soldiers gathering near the fort, hunting what they called renegade Apache bands. "They're sweeping through the south ridges," the trader said, shaking his head. "Ain't a good time to be alone out here. They're taking anyone they think's helping them." The farmer kept his face calm, but his chest tightened. He asked no questions, though his thoughts were racing. He knew then that the warrior's return would not go unnoticed if it happened again. After the trader left the next morning, the farmer went out to the ridge where he had last seen the warrior ride away. He stood there for a long time, staring toward the south. There was no sign of movement, only the endless land stretching toward the horizon. But something inside him told him the Apache would return. He couldn't explain why. It was as if the storm had tied their fates together somehow, through words neither could take back. As the days turned to weeks, the moon began to wane again. The nights grew colder, the sky clearer. The farmer often found himself sitting by the fire, staring into the flames the same way the warrior had. He thought of what it meant to leave something behind, to create life in a world that had seen so much death. The idea still frightened him, yet it no longer seemed foolish. It seemed almost right. Still, he didn't understand what part he played in it, or how a simple man like him could matter in a story bigger than his small field and broken plow. On the night of the new moon, he woke suddenly to the sound of hooves outside. His heart pounded as he reached for his rifle. Then a voice came from the darkness, steady, calm, and familiar. "It is me." The farmer lowered the gun slowly and opened the door. The Apache stood there, rain dripping from his hair, his face shadowed by the lantern light. "You came back," the farmer said, relief and worry mixing in his voice. The warrior nodded. "I said I would." He stepped inside, his clothes damp, his presence filling the room again with that same quiet intensity. This time he carried something, a small bundle wrapped in animal hide. He placed it gently on the table and untied the cloth. Inside lay a necklace made of carved bone and turquoise, worn smooth with age. "This belonged to my mother," the warrior said. "She gave it to me when I became a man. I give it to you now." The farmer stared at the necklace, not understanding. "Why?" he asked. The Apache's eyes softened. "Because if you choose to stand with me, you will need to be seen as part of my people too." The farmer looked at the necklace again, the pale blue stone glimmering in the lamplight. "And if I don't?" he asked quietly. "Then I will take it back," the warrior said, "and you will never see me again." The air between them grew thick. The farmer felt a strange pull inside him, as though something ancient and unspoken had risen from the earth beneath his feet. "You're asking me to give up everything I know," he said. The Apache nodded. "Sometimes a man must lose his old life before the new one begins." The wind howled outside, the door rattling on its hinges. The farmer looked into the warrior's eyes and saw something there, a loneliness as deep as his own. He picked up the necklace, feeling its weight in his palm, then looked toward the fire. The night stretched on, filled with silence broken only by the crackle of wood and the whisper of the storm returning. The Apache sat still, watching him, waiting for an answer. The farmer's heart raced. He thought of the soldiers, the empty fields, the graves near the oak, and the endless loneliness that had filled his life. He thought of the strange peace that had come with the warrior's words, the feeling that the land itself had begun to breathe again. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but firm. "If I agree," he said, "what happens next?" The Apache looked up, his expression solemn. "Then the land will know your name," he said. "And what we begin here will change more than you can see." The farmer swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the necklace. Outside, the wind carried the cry of a coyote, long and haunting across the plain. The firelight flickered, casting their shadows on the wall, two figures bound by something they could not yet name. Neither man spoke again, but both knew the night had changed everything. What waited beyond it was uncertain, but neither would ever return to the life they had known before. The following morning broke with a heavy silence. A pale layer of mist clung to the ground and the fields shimmered with dew. The farmer stood by the door, the necklace still clutched in his hand. Its cool weight seemed to burn against his skin, as if it carried the memory of another life. The Apache warrior had already gone outside, tending to his horse near the edge of the yard. His movements were quiet, almost graceful, yet there was a sense of urgency in the air, like a man preparing for something he couldn't name. When the farmer stepped out, the warrior turned to him, eyes steady. "There are soldiers not far from here," he said. "They've been hunting us since before the rain. They move through the valleys, burning what they find." The farmer's stomach tightened. "You mean they'll come this way?" The warrior nodded once. "Soon." The wind carried the faint sound of crows circling over the ridge, a sign of unrest in the land. The farmer's gaze drifted to his cabin, to the worn tools leaning against the wall, to the field he'd worked for years. He had always believed this small patch of land would protect him from the chaos beyond, but now it felt exposed, fragile. The Apache warrior looked toward the hills. "You should leave before they come." The farmer's jaw tightened. "This is my home," he said. "I've got nowhere to go." The warrior studied him for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Home means nothing if the land turns against you. Soldiers don't see homes, only targets." His words cut deep. The farmer had seen it happen to others. Ranches burned because someone was suspected of sheltering natives, barns looted in the name of the law. But this time, it was his own peace at risk. As the day stretched on, tension settled over the valley. The farmer worked in silence, but his eyes kept drifting to the ridges. The warrior moved like a shadow, gathering herbs from the stream, carving something small and careful from a piece of wood. Though they spoke little, something unspoken grew between them, an understanding born not from trust, but from shared solitude. The warrior carried scars, not just on his skin but deep inside, the kind that came from losing everything yet refusing to break. The farmer recognized that pain. It mirrored the emptiness that had lived in him for years. By sunset, clouds began to roll in again. A storm was forming far to the south, and thunder murmured faintly in the distance. As the two men ate by the fire, the farmer asked what had been gnawing at him since the night before. "When you said the land will know my name." "What did you mean?" The Apache stirred the fire with a stick before answering. Our people believe the earth remembers those who give to it. When you plant, when you bleed, when you love, it all stays here. The child I spoke of would carry both our names, both our spirits. It would belong to this land more than to either of us. The farmer frowned. But there's no woman here. You speak like something's already decided. The warrior looked up, his eyes glinting with the firelight. Some things are decided before we understand them, he said. The land will bring what's needed. The farmer leaned back uneasy. He couldn't tell if the man spoke in riddles or truth, yet the thought stayed with him, unsettling but strangely hopeful, as if something larger than both of them was quietly unfolding. Later that night, the rain came hard. The wind howled through the valley, and the cabin shuddered under the storm's weight. The farmer woke to a knock at the door, a desperate, hurried sound. He grabbed his lantern and opened it to find a figure collapsed on the porch. It was a woman soaked to the bone, her face pale and her clothes torn from travel. The warrior rushed forward, helping her inside without a word. She shivered violently, barely conscious, whispering in broken breaths. They took everything. The soldiers. They burned the wagons. The farmer and the warrior worked quickly, wrapping her in blankets, setting her near the fire. As she warmed, her face became clearer, young, perhaps no more than 20, her eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. She said her family had been traveling west, trying to cross into the valley before winter, but a patrol had attacked them near the river. She had escaped through the rain and wandered for 2 days with nothing but a small pendant around her neck. The warrior looked at the pendant and recognized its pattern. It bore symbols of an Apache mother's prayer, carved long ago by his people. "How do you have this?" he asked her quietly. The woman's eyes flickered with confusion. "My mother gave it to me before she died. She said it came from her mother's people, far to the south." The warrior's face darkened, his breath catching. "Then you carry the blood of my tribe." The farmer watched, unsure what to say. The woman's arrival felt like something woven into the warrior's strange prophecy. She was fragile, frightened, yet there was a strength in her eyes that drew both men's attention. Over the next days she recovered slowly, helping where she could, though her silence often lingered like a veil. The farmer found himself watching her from a distance, the way she moved with quiet grace, how she listened to the wind before speaking, how her gaze softened when looking toward the hills. Something about her seemed to belong here, as though the land itself had called her home. But danger grew closer. One morning the warrior returned from the ridge, his horse lathered with sweat. "They're near," he said grimly. "Soldiers have reached the creek. They've found the ashes of our old camp." The farmer's heart sank. "What will they do if they find you here?" The Apache met his eyes. "They won't ask questions." The woman stepped forward, fear flashing in her expression. "They'll kill you," she whispered. The warrior's voice was steady. "Then I'll make sure they don't find this place." He began gathering his things, his bow, a knife, the small pouch of herbs. The farmer followed him outside. "You can't fight them alone," he said. The warrior turned, a faint smile touching his lips. "I've been fighting alone all my life." He mounted his horse, rain beginning to fall again, and rode toward the hills without another word. The farmer stood watching until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the storm. The woman stayed behind, helping the farmer secure the cabin and cover the windows. The storm grew wilder as the day went on, wind tearing at the roof and lightning flashing over the plains. Inside, tension pressed heavy in the air. The woman sat by the fire, turning the necklace in her hands. "He means something to you," she said quietly. The farmer hesitated. "He's strange, but he's not a bad man. I don't understand him, that's all." She looked up, her eyes deep with sorrow. "He carries more pain than he shows. My mother told me of men like him, warriors who wander because they've lost their reason to stay." When night came, neither of them could sleep. Every sound outside felt sharper, every gust of wind like a warning. The farmer's thoughts raced between fear and worry. If the soldiers found the warrior, they'd surely come here next. Yet a part of him refused to believe that the Apache would fall so easily. He had seen strength in him that didn't come from weapons. It came from something older, something tied to the earth itself. Just before dawn, the farmer heard a faint sound from the ridge, 3 quick calls of a night bird, then silence. The woman's eyes met his. "It's him," she whispered. They went outside, rain still dripping from the roof, and saw the warrior riding down from the hills. His face was cut, his shoulder bleeding, but his eyes burned with purpose. "They're coming," he said. "But they think I went west. We have little time." He dismounted and handed the farmer a wrapped bundle. Take this and leave at first light, he said. Go north toward the canyon. There's a cave there, safe for a few days. The farmer looked at the bundle. Inside were dried food, a skin of water, and the carved wooden figure the warrior had been shaping days earlier. It was small, shaped like a child, half painted with red and white markings. What is this? He asked. The warrior's voice softened. A promise, he said, for what must come after. The farmer wanted to argue, but the sound of thunder in the distance wasn't just from the storm. It was the echo of hooves, faint but growing. The woman gasped, clutching the pendant at her throat. The warrior looked toward the horizon, his face unreadable. They're closer than I thought. He turned to the farmer, his tone steady but final. If they find me, they'll stop here next. Don't let them. Protect her. The farmer shook his head. You can't face them alone. The warrior met his gaze, calm and unflinching. I already am. Then he mounted his horse once more, disappearing into the rain before the farmer could say another word. The woman stared after him, her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. The farmer stood beside her, his heart pounding as the sound of thunder, both sky and hoof, grew louder over the plains. He looked at the wooden figure in his hand, then at the horizon where the warrior had vanished, and for the first time he realized the fight ahead would not be about land or survival. It would be about the promise that bound them all, the child, the legacy, and the fragile hope that still lived in the storm's heart. The storm had quieted by dawn, leaving behind a sky streaked with gray and a land soaked through with mud and fear. The farmer stood at the edge of his field, staring toward the horizon where the Apache warrior had vanished into the hills. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the faint smell of gunpowder from far away. Somewhere beyond those ridges, soldiers were riding through the valley, and every hoofbeat brought them closer to his cabin. He gripped the wooden figure in his hand, feeling the carved edges dig into his palm. It was more than a symbol now. It was a promise he didn't fully understand. One that tied him to a man he should have feared but instead respected more than anyone alive. Inside, the woman packed what little they could carry: dried food, a blanket, a tin of matches. Her hands trembled, though she tried to hide it. The farmer watched her quietly. You don't have to come, he said. She looked up sharply. And stay here to be found? I won't wait to burn. Her tone was calm but full of something raw, the memory of what she had already lost. She tightened the strap on the small satchel and met his eyes. He told us to run. We have to trust him. They left the cabin before the sun broke fully over the land. The farmer took one last look at his home, the wooden walls and smoke-stained roof that had been his world for years. Every board held a memory: his father's laughter, his mother's singing, the long, lonely nights when only the wind kept him company. Now it all looked fragile, like something waiting to be erased. He turned away and followed the woman toward the North Canyon, the path the warrior had told them about. The ground was slick, and the sky darkened again by mid-morning. They moved fast, cutting through patches of brush and following the narrow stream that ran between the rocks. The farmer's heart raced with every sound, the rustle of leaves, the cry of a hawk overhead. Once they heard horses far off echoing faintly through the hills. The woman stopped, her breath catching. They're close, she whispered. He nodded, motioning her toward the thicker woods. They hid beneath a cluster of cedar trees, crouched low as the sound of riders grew louder. From their cover they saw them, 5 soldiers, moving in a line along the trail below. Their uniforms were muddied, faces hard and tense. One carried a burned flag tied to his saddle. Another had a locket hanging from his neck, glinting each time the light hit it. They spoke briefly, their words carried faintly by the wind. Tracks head north, one said. 2 on foot, maybe 3. Could be the ones he's protecting. The farmer's breath froze. The soldier's voice was cold, practiced, men used to hunting. Orders are to clear the valley, another said. No survivors. The group rode on, their voices fading into the distance. The woman's eyes met his, wide with fear. They're hunting us, she said softly. He nodded, his jaw tight. And him. They waited until the last sound vanished before moving again, staying low and silent. The trail narrowed, twisting through jagged rocks that scraped at their boots. By the time they reached the canyon mouth, the sun was hidden behind clouds again. The cave the warrior had mentioned lay just beyond a small cluster of boulders, half concealed by vines. It was dark inside but dry and deep enough to hide them. They rested there, the fire burning low. The woman sat against the wall, staring into the flames. Do you think he'll come back? She asked quietly. The farmer didn't answer at first. "If he's alive," he said finally, "he'll find us." The word sounded steady, but inside he wasn't sure. He thought of the warrior's face as he rode away, calm, unafraid, like a man walking toward something he'd already accepted. As night fell, the wind outside shifted, carrying with it a strange stillness. The woman dozed for a while, her head resting on her knees while the farmer kept watch. Every so often he stepped outside to listen. Once he thought he saw movement near the ridge, a shadow slipping between trees. He tensed, hand on his rifle, but then the wind rose again and the shadow was gone. When he returned inside, the woman stirred. "It's him," she murmured, half asleep. "He's out there." He didn't answer, but his heart believed it too. Hours passed. The storm clouds gathered once more, rumbling faintly in the distance. The farmer stared at the fire, lost in thought. He remembered the warrior's words about the land, how it remembered kindness and cruelty. He wondered what it remembered of him. A man who had lived quietly, taking only what he needed, asking for nothing more than peace. Yet now here he was, hunted, carrying the hope of a man whose world had already been destroyed. Suddenly a noise echoed from outside, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping under weight. The farmer grabbed his rifle and motioned for the woman to stay back. He stepped carefully toward the entrance, his pulse racing. The night was black, the rain beginning again in soft drops. Then a voice came through the darkness, low but clear. "Don't shoot." The farmer froze. Out of the shadows emerged the Apache warrior, his body streaked with mud and blood, one arm bound with cloth. His eyes were tired but alive. "You made it," the farmer said, lowering the gun. The warrior nodded faintly. "They're close. I led them away as long as I could." He stumbled, catching himself against the wall. The woman rushed forward, helping him inside. His breath came in short gasps, and the farmer could see the wound on his shoulder was worse than it looked. "We have to stop the bleeding," he said, tearing a strip of fabric from his sleeve. The warrior didn't protest, though his jaw clenched with pain. As the farmer worked, the warrior spoke in fragments. "They burned what was left of our camp, women and children gone. The soldiers take what they call justice, but there's no mercy in it." His voice cracked, though he didn't let it show long. The woman listened in silence, tears glistening in her eyes. "You can't fight them alone," she said softly. The warrior met her gaze. "I don't plan to. The land fights with me." For a while they sat in silence. Outside the rain came harder, and thunder rolled closer. The farmer felt the tension growing with every rumble, every flicker of lightning through the narrow cave mouth. The warrior turned his head toward the sound. "They'll find us soon," he said. "They follow smoke footprints scent. We can't stay here long." The farmer looked toward the storm. "Where do we go?" he asked. The warrior's eyes darkened. "There's an old canyon to the east carved deep by the river. It hides more than men. It hides memory. If we reach it before dawn, they'll lose our trail." The farmer hesitated, but the woman spoke first. "Then we go." Her voice held no fear now, only quiet resolve. The warrior gave a single nod. He stood with effort, his body trembling but his spirit unbroken. The farmer helped him to his horse, which waited just beyond the cave, half sheltered by rock. Lightning flashed overhead as they began their journey east. The land stretched out before them like a vast breathing thing, wet, alive, full of whispers. The storm chased them, wind tearing at their clothes, mud pulling at their boots. The woman rode behind the warrior, her arms steady around his waist as he guided the horse through the darkness. The farmer followed on foot, his rifle strapped across his back, every sense alive with dread and determination. Somewhere behind them came the faint echo of horses, soldiers on their trail again. The warrior turned his head, eyes narrowing. "They move faster than I hoped." The farmer's breath came hard. "How many?" "Too many," the warrior replied. "But the river will slow them." The rain became a torrent, blurring everything into gray. Thunder cracked above as they reached the edge of the canyon, a sheer drop of stone and mist. The river roared below, swollen from the storm, wild and merciless. The path down was narrow, slick with mud. The warrior dismounted and handed the reins to the farmer. "You go first," he said. The farmer looked at the steep descent and then back at him. "You're hurt," he said. The warrior shook his head. "You carry what I cannot." The farmer hesitated, gripping the reins tighter. The woman met his eyes. "We'll make it," she said softly. He nodded and began leading the horse down the rocky path, every step treacherous. The sound of the river drowned out everything else, until another sound broke through it. Gunfire. The first shot echoed off the canyon walls, sharp and close. The farmer ducked, pulling the woman behind a rock. The warrior turned, drawing his bow despite the wound. A second shot rang out, grazing the rock beside his head. "They found us," he said through clenched teeth. The farmer raised his rifle, scanning the ridge above. He could see figures in the mist, soldiers, their outlines flashing with muzzle light. "Keep moving," the warrior shouted. Bullets tore through the air as they scrambled down the slope. The horse reared, frightened, nearly losing its footing. The woman clung to the reins, her scream lost in the storm. The farmer fired back once, hitting nothing but echoing stone. The warrior moved like a shadow, quick and silent despite his pain, sending an arrow flying into the dark. A cry followed, distant but real. Rain poured harder, turning the path to slick clay. The farmer slipped, catching himself on the edge of a rock. The woman grabbed his arm, pulling him back as another bullet whistled past. "We can't stay here!" she shouted. The warrior's voice rose above the thunder. "Down to the river." They stumbled the last few steps, sliding into the canyon floor where the river churned like a beast. The roar was deafening. The warrior turned back once, eyes blazing. "They won't stop until one of us falls," he said. The farmer met his gaze, understanding passing between them without words. The moment felt like the turning of something great and terrible, the calm before the storm's true fury. Above them, lightning split the sky. The soldiers' shouts echoed through the rain, closing in. The warrior's bow was wet, his quiver nearly empty. The farmer's rifle was slick, his hands shaking. The woman clutched the wooden figure against her chest, whispering a prayer the wind carried away. Then the warrior stepped forward, standing between them and the ridge. His voice was steady, powerful even against the storm. "If the land remembers," he said, "then let it remember this." And as the thunder roared and the soldiers' boots echoed closer, the farmer knew the moment of reckoning had come. The story that began with a strange request beneath a quiet sky was now burning toward its fate, and there would be no turning back. The rain fell like a curtain of silver as the thunder rolled over the canyon, echoing against the stone walls. The farmer held the rifle close, his heart pounding, his eyes on the Apache warrior standing between him and the oncoming soldiers. The woman stood behind them, clutching the small wooden figure to her chest, her face pale but steady. The warrior's dark hair was soaked, plastered against his neck, his bowstring trembling in his grip. Above them, shadows moved through the storm, soldiers advancing along the ridge, their boots sliding against wet rock, rifles glinting each time lightning tore across the sky. The warrior turned slightly toward the farmer, his voice low and calm despite the chaos around them. "When the land takes something, it always gives something back," he said. "Remember that." Then he stepped forward into the open, his form outlined by the flash of lightning, his presence both fearless and haunting. The soldiers shouted, their rifles raised. But before they could fire, the warrior loosed an arrow that struck one of them square in the chest. The shot that followed cracked like fire, the bullet grazing his side, spinning him backward. The farmer fired in return, his bullet shattering the rock beside another soldier. The sound was deafening, rain mixing with smoke, thunder merging with gunfire. The woman cried out, ducking behind a boulder, while the warrior pulled himself upright, refusing to fall. "Go!" he shouted to them. "The river!" The farmer hesitated, torn between fight and flight, but one look at the soldiers' silhouettes above made the choice clear. He grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her toward the water's edge. The current was wild, foaming and brown, roaring with the force of the storm. The warrior turned to face the ridge once more, firing his last arrow before stumbling toward the river. The farmer reached for him, but another shot rang out. The warrior fell to one knee, gripping his side. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, but he lifted his head and met the farmer's eyes. "Take her," he said. "Take what must live." The farmer's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Another shot cracked through the canyon, and he made his choice. He caught the warrior under the arm, half dragging him toward the riverbank as the water surged around their boots. The three of them plunged into the cold current, just as more shots thundered through the air. The world turned to chaos, water, wind, and sound blending into a blur. The current seized them, pulling them downstream away from the canyon's mouth and the soldiers' cries. The farmer fought to keep them above water, his arms aching, the woman clinging to the warrior's hand as they were carried through the torrent. Rocks scraped their legs, branches tore at their clothes, and the storm roared above them like the voice of the earth itself. When they finally washed up against the riverbank miles downstream, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The world was gray and quiet again. The farmer crawled to the shore, gasping for breath, then turned to pull the woman from the water. She coughed hard, her face pale, still holding the wooden figure tightly. The warrior lay still for a moment, his body motionless before his chest rose with a faint breath. The farmer knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his wound. "Stay with me," he said, his voice breaking. The warrior's eyes fluttered open, faint but focused. "You kept your promise," he whispered. They found shelter in a small hollow near the trees, building a weak fire with what dry twigs they could gather. The woman cleaned the warrior's wound as best she could, binding it with strips of her shawl. The farmer sat nearby, staring into the flames, his thoughts lost between exhaustion and disbelief. The storm had passed, but the air still carried the smell of gunpowder and loss. When the warrior finally spoke again, his voice was softer, as if carried from far away. "They'll stop chasing now," he said. "They think we're dead." The farmer nodded slowly. "You saved us." The warrior looked at him with quiet strength. "No, the land saved us. It took what it needed." His gaze drifted toward the fire. "You must go north to the high plains. There are people there who will give you shelter. Tell them who you are. They will understand." His eyes shifted to the woman who watched him silently, her expression heavy with sorrow. "Your mother's people once lived beyond those hills," he said to her. "They will know you by the pendant you wear." She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. "Come with us," she pleaded. "You can't stay here." The warrior smiled faintly, though pain shadowed his eyes. "This is where I belong. The land remembers me here." His breathing grew slower, but there was peace in his expression. "The child will come," he said, looking at her and then at the farmer. "It will carry both our blood. That is what I meant." The farmer felt his chest tighten. "You knew this all along," he murmured. The warrior's lips curved into a faint smile. "I only knew what the wind told me." As dawn broke, the first rays of light touched the land, turning the wet grass to gold. The warrior's eyes closed, his body still. The farmer sat in silence for a long time, the crackle of the fire fading as the world around them grew brighter. The woman wept quietly beside him, her tears mixing with the morning dew. They buried the warrior near the riverbank where the wildflowers grew. The farmer carved a simple mark into the stone above the grave, a circle within 2 lines, the symbol of unity the Apache had once drawn in the dirt. Days turned into weeks as they made their way north. The land changed, hills giving way to open plains, rivers winding through fields of tall grass. The woman grew stronger each day, though she spoke little. At night, they camped beneath the stars, and the farmer often found himself thinking about the warrior's words. He began to notice the land again, the sound of the wind, the hum of insects, the way the stars seemed brighter in the silence. For the first time in years, he felt part of something larger than himself. When they finally reached the high plains, they found a small settlement hidden among the rocks. The people there were a quiet mix of settlers and natives, living together far from the soldiers' reach. An older woman came forward when she saw the pendant around the girl's neck. Her eyes filled with tears. "This belonged to my sister's line," she said softly. "You've come home." The woman smiled faintly, relief softening her tired face. The farmer felt the weight lift from his chest. They were safe for now. The people offered them food, shelter, and kindness. As the days passed, the farmer helped rebuild fences, mend roofs, and plant crops again. Life found its rhythm in the quiet valley. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the woman came to him, her hands resting gently over her stomach. Her eyes met his, shining with quiet understanding. "He was right," she said softly. "The child will come." The farmer felt a warmth spread through him, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He looked out over the land, green and alive under the evening sky. The wind carried the scent of rain and wildflowers, and in that moment he understood what the warrior had meant. The land did remember. It carried every sorrow and every promise, binding them together like the roots beneath their feet. Seasons passed, and the valley flourished. The woman gave birth to a strong, dark-eyed child who laughed easily and loved the sound of wind through the grass. The people said the child carried 2 spirits, one from the earth and one from the sky, and that both spoke through his heart. The farmer raised him as his own, teaching him how to plant, how to listen, and how to live with the land instead of against it. Sometimes when the wind blew from the south, the farmer would hear it whisper through the hills like a voice he once knew. He would look toward the horizon, where the river glimmered in the distance, and feel that the warrior was still there, watching, guiding, protecting what he had started. The farmer would touch the bone and turquoise necklace that now hung near the door. a silent reminder of a promise kept and a bond that time could never break. Years later, when the boy was old enough to understand, the farmer told him the story of the man who had come from the storm, the warrior who had asked for a child not of blood alone, but of peace. The boy listened, wide-eyed, his small hands resting on his knees. Was he brave, if he asked? The farmer smiled, his eyes distant. He was more than brave. He was the kind of man who made the land listen. The boy nodded, looking out toward the fields. Will the land remember me too? He asked. The farmer placed a hand on his shoulder. It already does, he said. And as the sun sank behind the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the wind carried a faint, familiar sound across the plains, a voice calm and steady echoing like a prayer. The farmer closed his eyes and let the silence answer. The land had taken, the land had given, and peace at last had found its home.